Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that Anita never thought her carefully curated life could fracture in the span of a few words, but that was before Leslie walked into the room holding a crumpled letter with shaking hands and a face pale enough to drain the air from it. The days leading up to this moment had already been tense unanswered calls, tense silences at family dinners, and that look Anita kept catching in Leslie's eyes, the one that was part suspicion, part raw accusation. It had begun innocently enough, with Peaches, Leslie's mother, or so everyone had believed, falling seriously ill. The woman was notorious for being evasive about her past, a storyteller who always added a flourish and left out the inconvenient parts. But no one expected her to take the biggest truth of all to her grave. Only she hadn't. On the day she was admitted to the hospital, Peaches had insisted on seeing Leslie alone. Anita remembered the way Leslie had come home afterward, disoriented, almost glassy-eyed. She hadn't said what they'd talked about, but Anita knew it was more than a casual goodbye. The real blow came 2 days later, when Peaches, frail but lucid enough to speak, handed Leslie an envelope. Anita had been there when Leslie left the hospital, clutching it like a lifeline. She had not, however, been there when Leslie read it, and that was the moment Anita's world began to unravel. The letter was Barbara's voice from beyond the grave. Leslie's real mother, long thought to have died quietly and tragically, had apparently left behind words meant to outlive her. And Peaches, for reasons no one yet understood, had chosen no at the precipice of her own death to deliver them. Leslie read the pages in her apartment, Eva sitting beside her on the couch. At first, her daughter leaned in, curious, but as the words unfurled, Eva's brow furrowed. She kept glancing at her mother, as if trying to confirm she'd read it right. Barbara's letter claimed that Anita had stolen not just the man Barbara loved, Vernon Dupree, but also her career. A singing career Barbara had been building for years, one that Anita allegedly dismantled piece by piece, until Barbara was left with nothing but a child and the shadow of her own ambitions. And then came the knife twist. Vernon was Leslie's father. Eva sat back, stunned. If this is true, you're related to Nicole and Danny. They're your half-sisters. Leslie's hands trembled, her mind splintering in too many directions to focus. Nicole, who was currently untangling herself from a bitter divorce with Ted, the man Leslie had once been with, the father of Eva. The web of connections was nauseating. It wasn't just about family ties, it was about the fact that her entire history had been rewritten in a single moment. Anita, when confronted, didn't deny knowing Barbara. She couldn't. Their lives had been entangled decades ago. But the accusation that she had sabotaged Barbara's career and stolen Vernon lit a defensive fire in her eyes. Barbara had talent, Anita said, her tone clipped. But talent doesn't guarantee survival in that business. She made choices that ruined her. I didn't do that to her. Barbara's choices didn't kill her, Leslie shot back. But maybe you did. The room went still. Anita's children, Nicole and Danny, had always looked at their mother as a figure of elegance and strength. But in the days following the letter's reveal, they began to watch her differently, more guarded, more questioning. The tension was contagious. Even Ted, drawn into the chaos through his history with both Leslie and Nicole, seemed rattled. He and Leslie had fought enough battles over Eva, but this was a war on a different front. For Leslie, the revelation sparked a volatile mixture of rage and confusion. She had lost Barbara years ago without truly knowing her, and now, to learn that the loss might have been orchestrated by someone still sitting at the family table, was unbearable. And then there was the Dupree name. Vernon's name. The Duprees were not just any family, they were entrenched in business, money, legacy. If the blood in her veins was truly Dupree blood, then she was not an outsider peering in. She had rights. She had claims. And that alone was enough to make every Dupree uneasy. Anita felt it too, the way every room she walked into now felt slightly different, how eyes lingered a moment too long, as if measuring her against the accusations in Barbara's letter. For decades, she had been the matriarch in control, the one who managed appearances and outcomes. Now, she was the woman who might have stolen another's life. The fractures began to spread. Nicole's divorce became messy. Danny's marriage hit public turbulence. And Anita began to wonder if this was the price for her past, whether the collapse of her daughter's marriages was a delayed consequence of the choices she had made to secure Vernon for herself. Meanwhile, Leslie found herself caught between grief for a mother she'd barely known and the intoxicating fury of knowing she might have been denied everything that should have been hers. She wasn't just mourning Barbara, she was mourning the life Barbara had been prevented from giving her. Eva, caught in the middle, felt the ground shift under her own feet. If her mother was part of the Dupree family, what did that make her? And what did it mean for her father, Ted, who had once been married to Nicole? The layers of connection were suffocating, the family tree a tangle of branches that seemed ready to snap. The last days of Peach's life became a strange vigil. Leslie visited her daily, torn between gratitude for the woman who had raised her and resentment for the secrets she'd kept. Peaches, for her part, seemed content to let the letter speak for her, offering no further explanations. When Anita visited the hospital, Peaches would not meet her eyes. Whether it was guilt, triumph, or something else entirely, no one could tell. Barbara's final words became a living presence among them, haunting every conversation. Were they truth, or were they the final move in a decades-old rivalry? Anita insisted they were lies born of bitterness. Leslie wasn't sure. And Vernon, still alive, still holding the Dupree legacy, had yet to weigh in. Whether he was silent out of denial or calculation, no one knew. But his silence was a void Leslie could not ignore. She began to imagine what it would mean to stand in front of him, to demand acknowledgement not as an outsider, but as his daughter. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Anita sensed it coming. That was why she moved carefully, keeping Nicole and Danny close, even as suspicion crept into their eyes. The tighter she tried to hold the family together, the more it seemed to resist her grasp. The crisis had started with a dying woman's confession, but it was no longer confined to the hospital room. It was spilling into boardrooms, dinner tables, and the private conversations of people who were not supposed to be listening. Every day brought a new ripple, someone whispering about Leslie's claim to the Dupree name, someone questioning Anita's past, someone speculating about Vernon's reaction. And for Leslie, every ripple was a reminder that the life she thought she knew was gone, replaced by a mystery with stakes far higher than she'd anticipated. Her next move would decide everything, whether she remained an outsider chasing a ghost, or stepped fully into the family that might never want her. Leslie knew that waiting would only let Anita fortify her defenses, so she moved quickly. Her first step was to reach Vernon directly, something no one in the family seemed eager to help her with. Calls to his office were intercepted by assistants. Attempts to show up in person ended with her being politely, but firmly told he wasn't available. That alone told her the rumor had reached him, and that he was deliberately choosing silence over engagement. Eva, seeing her mother's growing obsession, tried to intervene. You need to think about what happens if he slams the door in your face. Do you really want to give him the power to reject you twice, once in the past and once now? But Leslie was beyond caution. She had lived her whole life in a fog of missing answers. Now that the mist was clearing, she couldn't walk away. Anita, meanwhile, was working just as tirelessly behind the scenes. She called Nicole and Danny into her home for long, closed-door conversations. She framed Barbara's letter as the product of a dying woman's resentment, reminding them of all the years she had been there for them, raising them, guiding them, protecting them from the instability Barbara had fallen into. Nicole listened with arms folded, eyes narrowed. Danny fidgeted, clearly caught between loyalty to her mother and the nagging thought that maybe there was more to the story. Anita could see the fractures in her daughter's trust, hairline cracks that could widen into something dangerous if she didn't keep control. Ted's name kept surfacing in all of this, unwanted but impossible to avoid. Nicole's divorce from him was already a public spectacle, and now Leslie's history with him added a layer of scandal that gossip circles couldn't resist. The idea that Ted had children with one sister and a romantic past with another was salacious enough to fuel weeks of whispered speculation. Anita hated it not just for the embarrassment, but because every new rumor chipped away at the family's dignity. Still, the most dangerous threat was Vernon himself. If he acknowledged Leslie as his daughter, Anita's position would be shaken to its core. She would no longer be the gatekeeper to the Dupree legacy. There would be a new heir in the picture, one with both a grievance and a claim. When Vernon finally broke his silence, it was not in person, but in a handwritten note sent directly to Leslie's apartment. The paper was thick, the handwriting deliberate. He confirmed knowing Barbara, confirmed there had been a relationship. But the rest was maddeningly vague, neither confirmed nor denied paternity, instead offering to meet in private. Leslie clutched the note, her heart pounding. It wasn't an admission, but it was an opening. She told Eva immediately. Eva's expression was wary. Private meetings can be traps. He might want to buy you off, make you go away quietly. Or, Leslie countered, he might want to tell me the truth without Anita there to control the narrative. The meeting was set for a Tuesday afternoon at an upscale hotel downtown, the kind of place that thrived on discretion. Leslie arrived early, scanning every face in the lobby. When Vernon appeared, he was older than she'd imagined, his hair silver, his posture still commanding. His eyes studied her with a mix of curiosity and calculation. They spoke for over an hour. He didn't confess outright, but he asked pointed questions about her childhood, her interests, her mother. When she pressed him directly, "Are you my father?" he hesitated long enough for her to take his silence as confirmation. When she left, she had no official acknowledgement, no document, but she had something almost as powerful, the sense that Vernon believed the truth was obvious and that he was deciding how to handle it. Anita learned about the meeting within 24 hours. She stormed into Leslie's apartment unannounced, her tone sharp. "You think you can just insert yourself into this family like you belong here? You have no idea what you're playing with." "I have every idea," Leslie replied, standing her ground. "You've spent years building a life on what you took from Barbara. That ends now." Their argument was loud enough to draw Eva from her room, and for the first time, she saw Anita not as the composed matriarch, but as a woman afraid. Anita's voice cracked as she warned Leslie to stop digging. Leslie refused. The fallout began almost immediately. Danny, after overhearing parts of the fight from a call with Nicole, began questioning Anita more directly. Nicole, who had been firmly in her mother's camp, started pulling back. Public appearances became strained photographs showing them together were dissected by tabloids looking for signs of disunity. Peach's death, when it came, was quiet. But her absence left a vacuum, removing the one person who could have clarified her motives in delivering the letter when she did. Anita claimed it was a manipulative act meant to sow chaos. Leslie saw it as an act of liberation, a final chance for her real mother's voice to be heard. The Dupree name was now openly attached to Leslie in whispers, and Vernon's inner circle began to take sides. Some saw her as a threat, others as an opportunity to modernize the family's public image by embracing her. Vernon himself remained publicly silent, but behind closed doors, he began having her investigated not to discredit her, but to understand her. Eva struggled with the attention. Friends at school started asking invasive questions, repeating things their parents had read online. She blamed Ted for fueling some of it, though whether he did so intentionally or simply by existing in the middle of the drama was unclear. Leslie pressed on. She began quietly gathering documents, photographs, and old recording anything that might connect Barbara to Vernon in ways Anita couldn't erase. The more she found, the clearer the pattern became. Barbara's career had stalled right when Anita's took off, Vernon appearing in Anita's life just as he disappeared from Barbara's. Confrontations became routine. Anita accused Leslie of trying to destroy the family. Leslie accused Anita of having already done so decades ago. Nicole and Danny were pulled back and forth between them, loyalty and doubt fighting for dominance. Ted, oddly enough, became a reluctant source of information. His marriage to Nicole had given him insight into Anita's tactics, and though he had no great love for Leslie, he admitted that her version of events felt plausible. The tension reached a breaking point when Vernon invited Leslie to a family gathering, an event Anita had not been informed about. She arrived to find Leslie seated at his table, Eva beside her, and Vernon introducing them to selected guests as family. The word hung in the air like a declaration of war. Anita's expression was unreadable, but her hands were clenched. Nicole and Danny exchanged glances, and in that moment, the balance of power in the Dupree family shifted. From then on, Anita's influence began to erode. Vernon didn't strip her of her role outright, but he began consulting Leslie on matters that Anita considered her domain. Nicole started taking calls from Leslie without telling her mother. Danny began asking Vernon questions she'd once been too afraid to voice. The rumors about Barbara's downfall refused to die. In fact, they grew louder, amplified by a leaked recording from decades ago, Barbara speaking tearfully about how her career had been sabotaged, her words matching almost exactly what was in the letter. Anita fought back, hiring a public relations team to paint Barbara as unstable, unreliable. But for every statement they released, another piece of supporting evidence for Leslie's claim emerged. The family's public image was no longer pristine. The Dupree name was now linked to betrayal, hidden children, and marital collapses. And while Anita saw it as a tragedy, Leslie saw it as the cost of truth. The stage was set for a confrontation that would decide not just her place in the family, but the legacy of everyone involved. And as the tension climbed, it became clear that someone, maybe Vernon, maybe Anita, would have to choose whether to let the past keep its hold or finally release it. The Dupree family's fractures, once invisible, had become impossible to hide. Every gathering was a performance under tension, every exchange between Anita and Leslie a careful maneuver in a battle neither was willing to lose. Vernon moved between them like a cautious chess player, each gesture scrutinized for signs of allegiance. Nicole and Danny, caught between loyalty and suspicion, drifted further apart from their mother. Danny seemed almost eager to test the boundaries of Anita's patience, asking blunt questions in front of guests. Nicole was quieter, but her withdrawal cut deeper. She no longer sought Anita's approval before making decisions, a small rebellion that Anita noticed and resented. Eva, though younger, was beginning to understand the stakes. She had once resisted her mother's obsession with uncovering the truth, but now she saw how much was at play, not just identity, but inheritance, influence, and the rewriting of an entire family history. She worried about the cost, but she no longer doubted why her mother fought so hard. Leslie, emboldened by Vernon's subtle gestures of inclusion, began to act less like an outsider and more like someone claiming what was hers. She took meetings with his legal advisors, attended events by his side, and was introduced to acquaintances as someone close to the family. Though no official announcement was made, the implication was clear. Anita responded by tightening her own alliances. She reached out to old friends, powerful names in social and business circles, warning them of a dangerous opportunist trying to dismantle the Dupree legacy. In private, her frustration turned to fury. Years of careful construction were unraveling because of a single letter delivered at the worst possible time. The final spark came in the form of a will. Vernon, perhaps feeling the pressure of age and scandal, began revising his estate plan. Word leaked that Leslie's name had been added not as a vague beneficiary, but with a significant claim equal to Nicole's and Danny's. The revelation was a public earthquake. Anita confronted Vernon in his study, her voice rising enough to be heard through the closed doors. "You can't possibly believe this is wise. She's a stranger, worse, she's an enemy." "She's blood," Vernon cut in, the first time he'd spoken the word aloud in Anita's presence. "And that matters." The admission, simple and unadorned, landed like a blade. Anita's eyes hardened. For years, she had defined herself not only as Vernon's wife, but as the guardian of his legacy. Now she was being told the legacy belonged to someone she had spent her life keeping out. The tension bled into public life. At a charity gala, the two women arrived separately, both flanked by allies, both dressed in sharp black that seemed more like armor than fashion. Photographers captured them in the same frame, eyes locked in a silent battle. The images hit social media within hours, sparking headlines about the Dupree family Cold War. Eva, standing beside Leslie that night, noticed something she hadn't before. Anita looked tired. Not defeated, but worn down, as if the constant need to fight had finally begun to drain her. Leslie noticed too, but where Eva felt a flicker of sympathy, Leslie felt a surge of determination. The decisive moment came not in a grand ballroom or a boardroom, but at the reading of Vernon's updated will. He was not dead. This was a legal formality meant to settle disputes before they became lawsuits. Still, the atmosphere was heavy with expectation. Anita sat stiffly, her daughters on either side. Leslie sat across from them, Eva beside her. Vernon's attorney read the provisions slowly, methodically. When Leslie's name was spoken, Anita's jaw tightened. When the amount of her inheritance was revealed, Danny's eyes widened. Nicole stared straight ahead. It wasn't just money, it was property, stock holdings, influence, and family foundations. It was a recognition that Leslie was not a footnote but a central figure in the Dupree story. Anita rose before the attorney had finished. "This is a mistake," she said coldly, her gaze fixed on Vernon. "One you'll regret." Vernon didn't respond. His silence was the final confirmation that the shift was permanent. In the weeks that followed, the family adapted in fits and starts. Nicole and Danny began communicating more with Leslie, though cautiously. Anita retreated from public events, citing exhaustion. The tabloids speculated about her fall from grace, but those close to her knew she was plotting, waiting for the right moment to reassert herself. Leslie, for her part, didn't see this as victory yet. She had gained recognition, but the truth about Barbara's downfall still lingered in half-light, denied by Anita, whispered about by others. Whether to push for a full public reckoning or to let the matter rest became the question that haunted her. One evening, while sorting through a box of Barbara's old belongings, Leslie found a cassette tape labeled only with a date. When she played it, she heard Barbara's voice, clear and trembling, speaking about Anita, Vernon, and the betrayal that had ended her career. It was more than rumor, no, it was testimony. She sat there for a long time, the tape still spinning, the weight of choice heavy on her. Releasing it would destroy Anita's public image completely, perhaps even fracture what remained of the family. Keeping it would mean accepting a partial truth, living with unfinished business. Eva came into the room, saw the tape, and understood instantly. "If you play that for the world," she said softly, "there's no going back." Leslie looked at her daughter, then at the tape, and felt the pull of two futures, one where the truth was complete and scorched the earth, and one where the truth remained partial, but left something standing. The story would end one way or another, but in that moment, she realized the power was hers to decide how. And in the quiet that followed, she smiled not with triumph, but with the strange, steady calm of someone who had finally stepped out from behind the gate.